invited a number of quite significant speakers, people who are significant figures in promoting Buddhism in the West. People like Thich Nhat Hanh, Ayya Khema, Sangharakshita, of course. The theme of the Congress was unity and diversity, and I think it certainly had that flavour. There are a number of stalls, I don't know, perhaps as many as 100 stalls of different Buddhist groups and even different commercial groups trying to sell their wares. There's very much the flavour of a sort of bazaar in that area. People, in a sense, sort of rummaging through Buddhism in Europe, having a look at this and having a look at that. I thought FWBO Germany did a magnificent job. They organised the stalls, they organised Bante's visit, they helped Karuna set up the Karuna stall there, and all that seemed to go very, very well. There were 20 or 30 order members present. The atmosphere at our stall was always very uplifting and very positive, and there were order members all over the place. And one of the good things I thought was that there were order members translating other people's talks, members of the FWBO filming on behalf of the Congress. I think the FWBO generally came out of the Congress very well, and that's a tribute to the work that was done by Dharma Priya and the other people associated with FWBO Germany. And the central piece of every day were several talks that took place in the main hall. Bante's talk, I thought, was a model Sangharakshita presentation. It's been published as a pamphlet called Buddhism for the West, and I really recommend that if people can, they get hold of the Windhorse Publications pamphlet and read it. They can also get hold of the Clear Vision video, which was made of that talk, and I really recommend that because Bante came across very strong, very articulate, with his usual presence. I was very impressed by Bante's presence at the Congress.
And it is this Sangha.
Und es ist dieser Sangha.
This Sangha in the wider sense.
Dieser Sangha im weitesten Sinn.
Not so much the individual Buddhist alone or in isolation.
Und nicht so sehr der einzelne Buddhist alleine oder in Isolation.
That raises the level of consciousness of people living in Western society.
Der den Grad der Bewusstheit der Menschen in der westlichen Gesellschaft steigert.
That changes that society by creating Western Buddhist institutions.
Der diese Gesellschaft verändert, indem sie westliche buddhistische Institutionen
and that
schaffen.
introduces the fundamental ideas of Buddhism into Western intellectual discourse.
Und der die Grundideen des Buddhismus in den westlichen intellektuellen Diskurs einführt.
It is this wider spiritual community.
Es ist diese weitere spirituelle Gemeinschaft,
that effects the psychological, social and economic integration of Buddhism into Western society.
Ein weiteres Highlight.
For me, one of the highlights was the panel discussion. It was a fascinating, challenging, and I thought very penetrating session. And I really do recommend that people acquaint themselves with some of the material in it. I think there were a lot of gems. And if people have the opportunity, if they can get hold of the video and watch that for themselves, I think they'd find it very, very
because it's quite an
rewarding.
important one, and I guess there are two speakers who could answer to the question. Here in the West are many misunderstandings about Tantra. What is the meaning of erotic pictures in Tibetan Buddhist art? And what is the practice about it?
That's a difficult one. I think it's sometimes people just... I think it's how you want to understand it.
Huh?
Some people want to understand one particular way. And actually, the whole principle of Tantra is also based comes very much out of the union of wisdom and compassion. In fact, the union of the deity is...
Shogyo Rinpoche has given, of course, a very beautiful explanation, as we expected, and I thoroughly agree with his explanation. But of course, I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I spent some 14 years in the Eastern Himalayas.
And also, like Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh has been working, for example, in the peace movement. These kind of areas, getting into mainstream work. Do you know what I'm saying? In that, I think it's really important for us to, after having studied the teachings, having insight into that this wisdom we must thus translate actually into action. This, I think, is really the work that we need to start.
Could I add something there? I think there are two extremes. On the one hand, there is dharma without social action. On the other, there is social action without dharma. We know a lot of people I'm not speaking of Buddhists now, mainly of non-Buddhists, who are engaged in some form of social action, but very often it goes wrong. We have even peace movements and peace groups in many countries, but very often they go wrong. And we get a lot of competitiveness and internal fighting and wrangling, even in peace movements. So if we have social action, Buddhist social action, it's very important that that should be firmly based upon the Dharma, and that the people who are the social workers should be people who are experienced from a Dharmic point of view. That's why in our work in India, the Karuna Trust and TBMSG work, we don't have just social workers. All our workers are people who are dharmically trained. They do the social work, but they also meditate. They also study the Dharma texts, and they also practice spiritual fellowship. They also enjoy Sangha with one another. I would almost say, if I may be allowed to be a little extreme, that social action without the Dharma may well do more harm than good.
I thought it was a very good Congress from the point of view of the FWBO. It was an opportunity for Bhante to put his very particular message across to quite a wide audience and to get it established, to get it disseminated into the area where there is, into an area where there's currently quite a bit of debate going on. People are asking questions about how Buddhism is going to appear in the West. People are asking questions about how Buddhism is going to manifest in the modern age. Bhante's got very, very particular ideas in this area. He's thought the whole thing through a great deal. It's very important that the FWBO is represented in these sorts of fora. It's very important that Bhante gets his voice heard. This was a very good opportunity for that. I hope there are going to be many more.